Welcome back, everyone. It's great to have you here for another deep dive.
It is.
And today,
Yeah.
we're tackling a topic that I think is universally relevant.
Absolutely.
And often kind of tiptoed around failure.
Yeah.
We're going to deep dive into failure today.
Yep.
But not in a way to make you feel bad.
Right.
We're going to really explore the idea of failing forward.
I love that.
How to use those moments when things don't go as planned to actually propel yourself forward.
That's right.
And so we've got a great collection of sources for this.
We do.
Really exploring how to kind of reframe and rethink
Yeah.
what it means to fail and how we can best use it.
I think that's going to be so valuable for people because I think we have this idea that failure is just the end,
Yeah.
but it's not. That's
Yeah.
just the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really understand how a shift in how we view failure,
Mm-hmm.
and even more importantly, how we respond to it,
Yes.
can unlock significant growth. Yeah, and
Yes.
ultimately lead to achievement.
That's it.
And I think sometimes we really need to look to other people and other
Sure.
stories to see how that actually plays out in the real world.
I completely agree.
So let's dive in.
No.
I think one of the first things we really need to address is this idea that we have this almost innate
Yes.
fear of failure.
I think that is absolutely true.
And our sources talk about this right away.
That's right.
You know, think about that professor who on the very first day of class says,
Yeah.
look, 60% of you are going to fail.
I hated that.
Or, 30% are going to get a C or below.
Right.
Immediately, you're setting up this environment that is not
That's right.
really conducive to learning.
That's right.
It's about winning or losing.
Exactly.
And not really about growth.
It's true.
And I think that is the misunderstanding of failure from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
So many times we view it as that percentage or that one event. And one of the first things that our sources really hit on is that failure is not an event.
Right.
It's a process.
Yes.
And I love that reframing because it really takes the pressure off that initial event.
Absolutely.
In one of our previous deep dives, we talked about
Mm-hmm.
the experience of
Right.
going up for a vote,
Yeah.
not receiving a unanimous vote.
Right.
And in that moment, my initial reaction
Oh, sure.
was disappointment.
Yeah.
And my father said,
Okay.
well, that's probably the best vote you'll ever receive.
And that's so valuable because
Completely reframes it.
yeah, and it takes it out of this idea that everything has to be perfect
Right.
and that there's a problem with you if it isn't.
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's the insight that we can take from that
Yeah.
because it says even in rejection, there's valuable information there.
Yeah.
It's a form of feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And it really makes you question.
What does success mean?
That's right.
What does failure mean?
Exactly.
And I think that is a big takeaway from the sources
Yeah.
is this idea that there's a fundamental difference between how average people approach
Yeah.
negative experiences
Yeah.
and how achieving people
That's right.
approach them.
There's a huge difference.
And they actually go so far as to have these two lists,
Yes.
failing backward versus failing forward.
Yeah. It's so interesting to look at the two and kind of see yourself
Abs-
on those lists.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So failing backward,
Yeah.
blaming others,
Right.
repeating the same mistakes,
Right.
expecting never to fail again,
Right.
blindly accepting tradition,
Yeah.
being limited by past mistakes, thinking I am a failure,
Exactly.
and ultimately quitting.
Yeah.
That's a great picture of someone stuck.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think when you look at that list,
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to think, well, I don't do any of those things.
Right.
But then when you really start to look at
It's
that.
more subtle sometimes than we realize.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important to really self-reflect
Yeah.
and see where you might be on that spectrum.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And on the other side,
Yeah.
you have failing forward,
That's it.
taking responsibility for your actions and choices,
Right.
learning from each mistake,
Mm.
knowing that failure is a part of the process,
Yes.
challenging outdated assumptions,
Right.
taking new risks,
Absolutely.
believing that something didn't work,
Hmm.
rather than I am a failure.
That's such an important
Absolutely. And persevering. I think
Yeah.
that is such an important
Okay, good.
word.
Oh,
That's
good.
what failing forward is all about.
So for you, the listener,
Think about a recent situation where things didn't go as planned. Maybe a project didn't meet its goal.
yeah,
A personal target wasn't met.
Right.
Or an interaction didn't go as smoothly as you hoped.
Mm-hmm.
What was your initial reaction?
Right.
Were you blaming others? Were you making excuses? Were you giving up?
Yeah.
Or were you taking responsibility, learning from it, and moving forward?
That's right.
And I think that is
It's easy
such a key difference.
to get discouraged when you see the initial result.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's so easy
Doesn't meet.
to label something as a failure without considering the bigger picture.
That's right.
And our sources use a great example of this, and it's Tony Gwynn, the legendary baseball player.
Yeah, the Hall of Famer.
And the fact that he, made thousands of outs in his career.
Right.
But we don't view that as a failure.
We don't.
It was part of the process.
That's right.
The necessary attempts.
Yeah.
That led to his success.
Exactly.
So it's really reframing it as those moments are not negative.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually steps in the overall journey.
Absolutely.
And I think that is...
I think that's such a crucial for us to understand as we're going through this.
Because I think so often we look at those little moments and we think, oh, this is terrible, I'm a failure.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So instead of saying, okay, this is just a piece of data, I'm going to use this to get better.
And so I think that brings us to the point of what failure is not.
That's right.
It is not avoidable.
It's not avoidable. We're human beings.
Right. We're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily objective.
Right.
Your own interpretation.
It's about your perception of it.
Is crucial.
Absolutely.
It's not the end of the road.
That's right.
It's not irreversible.
It's not irreversible.
It shouldn't carry the weight of shame.
Nope.
It's not a final defining characteristic.
And probably most importantly, it does not make you a failure.
Right.
As a person.
You are not your failures.
Exactly.
Right.
Separate your identity from a particular outcome.
That's right.
And I think our sources do a really great job of illustrating this with stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is so powerful.
They're very vivid stories, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So starting with Mary Kay Ash.
Yeah.
Here's someone who found considerable success in direct sales,
right,
but then encounters a significant barrier in the corporate world simply because of her gender.
Yeah.
Being told that you're thinking like a woman again.
You're thinking like a woman again.
Is blatant dismissal.
Oh, yeah.
And prejudice.
Yeah.
But what's so inspiring is that she channeled that rejection into motivation.
That's right. She didn't.
She's like, okay, I'm going to allow it to defeat.
To start my own thing where that's not a problem.
Absolutely. And she recognized an unmet need and created a company that allowed women to thrive.
Absolutely.
And even when both her attorney and her accountant told her it was going to fail, she pressed on.
Yeah, you might as well just throw your savings away.
She didn't.
That's basically what they said.
Listen, she believed in her vision.
And it worked.
And it worked.
That's right.
So I think that's such an important lesson.
Yeah, and the insight there is rejection can be a powerful fuel for innovation.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Don't let closed doors define your potential.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
Build your own house.
And then you have the example of Sergio Zyman and New Coke.
Oh, yeah.
This is often cited as, a massive marketing failure.
Huge failure.
Costing the company a huge amount of money.
$100 million.
$100 million.
Lost his job.
Leading to Zyman's departure.
Yeah.
But what's so interesting is that this $100 million setback did not define his entire career.
It didn't.
He went on to have other successes.
Yeah, and even earlier successes.
Included
with Diet Coke.
Diet Coke.
Right, absolutely.
So, yeah.
So I think it's really important to...
Even if it's a huge setback.
Realize that even a highly visible, large-scale failure doesn't have to be career-ending.
It doesn't have to be.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Then you have Irma Bombeck.
Yeah. Irma Bombeck.
Her early life included its share of difficulties.
Yeah, she had pregnancies and losses of children.
Pregnancies and the loss of children.
Yeah.
She started with a very low-paying humor column.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly a glamorous start.
Right.
But she persisted with her writing. And eventually paid off.
It did.
Leading to a widely syndicated column.
Yeah.
Numerous best-selling books.
Yeah.
Television appearances.
Right.
And she even had her own...
A lot of people loved her.
Struggles with health later in life.
Later in life.
But she continued to write.
That's right.
And I think what is so powerful about her is that she said, I'm not a failure.
It's so good.
I failed at doing something.
It's such a good distinction.
And that distinction is so crucial because it's not about
We're separating
that
that.
action from your identity.
Exactly. It's about a specific approach.
That's right.
Or a specific action that didn't work.
And that's so valuable.
But you are not.
Because it allows you to continue
That's fair.
to learn and adjust without thinking that there's something wrong with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then,
okay.
just to touch on this briefly, our sources mention historical figures
Right.
who were perceived as failures.
Right.
So Mozart, his opera was called Too Noisy.
Too noisy.
Van Gogh sold only one painting in his lifetime.
Wow.
Edison was labeled as unteachable as a child. And Einstein was told he would never amount to much.
Never amount to much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
These people that we now consider
these are now people who
are considered to be geniuses.
Right.
So it really is a reminder that
it's a good reminder that those judicial judgment
can be completely wrong.
can be totally wrong.
Absolutely. And what appears to be a failure at one point could actually be a stepping stone to greater achievement.
That's right.
So then we move into some more
Absolutely
current examples.
Yeah.
Dick Fosbury with his Fosbury flop.
The Fosbury flop.
You know, it was definitely unconventional when it first appeared.
It was very...
It looked awkward to a lot of people.
Definitely.
It shattered existing records, earned him an Olympic gold medal.
It did.
And ultimately became the standard technique.
Yes.
And
it's interesting how now it just looks...
He didn't allow the skepticism to dictate his approach.
He believed in it.
Absolutely.
And he knew it was going to work.
So the insight there is that
I love that.
Innovative approaches often face initial resistance, but the results speak for themselves.
That's right.
So
trust your vision even if it's different.
Trust your vision even if it's different.
I love that.
And then we have Rudy Rudiger.
Oh, Ruth.
Limited athletic ability, academic struggles.
Right.
But he relentlessly pursued his dream.
Yeah, there's a movie about him, too.
To play football for Notre Dame.
Right.
And there's a great line from the movie. There's a million of me.
I love that.
And what that highlights...
That's it. It
means that I'm unique.
He refused to let those limitations define his capability.
Yeah, I love that.
So I think...
He didn't let other people's limitations...
It's powerful to hear that.
Yeah.
And it's about not comparing your journey to anyone else's.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Samuel Langley versus the Wright brothers.
Oh, yeah.
This provides a really interesting look at failing forward. Right. So Langley has significant financial backing.
He did, yeah. He was well-funded.
He actually achieved an early successful test flight of an unmanned aircraft.
But when he went to test it with a person in it...
His manned attempt ended in a very public failure.
It failed.
The criticism was intense.
Yeah.
And he ultimately gave up.
He gave up.
The Wright brothers, on the other hand, had far fewer resources.
Very fewer.
But they meticulously learned from each attempt.
Yeah.
They persevered through setbacks.
They kept going.
And ultimately achieved the first sustained...
They got that first sustained.
Manned flight.
Manned flight.
And I think the key difference here is that Langley allowed failure.
He let it defeat him?
To defeat him.
That's right.
The Wright brothers used it as a learning opportunity.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
It's all in how you view it.
And I think that is one of the major...
That insight there is...
takeaways from these stories. Resources alone don't guarantee success. The ability to learn and adapt from your failures is often the deciding factor.
And I love that because I think it really speaks to the power of perspective and the importance of perseverance. And then our sources go on to talk about this idea of the failure freeway.
Oh, yeah. I love this analogy.
I love this analogy.
It's so good.
It's such a great picture.
Right. The failure freeway.
Getting stuck in this pattern of repeated setbacks.
That's right.
And I love that they even include these examples of excuses that people gave for car accidents.
Oh, yeah. Like that hedge just sprang up in front of me.
You know, hedges springing up, invisible cars, telephone poles approaching at high speed.
It's funny, but you can kind of see how we all do that a little bit.
It is hilarious, but it's so true.
When we don't want to accept responsibility.
Have that temptation.
We come up with some pretty crazy...
rationalize or point fingers
That's right.
at external factors.
Yeah, so true.
But the message here is that to get off that freeway, you have to take ownership.
You have to say,
be willing to say,
I made a mistake.
That's right.
I was wrong.
Yep.
And I think sometimes that's the hardest thing to do.
It is so hard.
But it's the most crucial.
But it's the only way off the freeway.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And I love this quote from Michael Korda. He says, the inability to accept responsibility is the main reason why people fail.
They can't succeed.
So to succeed, you have to be able to accept responsibility.
That's right.
And then we go into a story about Chris Chandler, NFL quarterback.
NFL quarterback.
And he had a history of moving from team to team and never really finding success.
Right.
And he blamed
the politics of the league.
The politics of the league.
Yeah.
And then he met a coach who said, Chris,
you're talented.
You're talented.
But you're uncoachable.
Wow.
Tough love.
And Chandler finally accepted responsibility and became coachable. And it was at that point that his performance really improved.
That's right.
And they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. He took his team to the Super Bowl.
Oh.
So that's the moment where it shifted.
I think it's that internal shift from blaming external circumstances to embracing internal accountability.
Exactly.
And our sources really start to talk about our internal landscape.
That's right.
This mindset, this attitude that we need when facing failure.
That's right.
And they highlight...
It's all an inside job.
Greg Horn and his experience of...
Yeah. So Greg Horn has a story.
His grocery store being devastated by a flood.
His store flooded.
$1 million in losses?
$1 million in damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you know, it would be so easy.
It'd be easy to give up.
To just give up.
Yeah.
But his response
was
amazing.
Was so good.
He said, it's not what happens to me.
It's not what happens to me.
It's what happened in me.
It's what happens in me.
And I think that really speaks to the fact that...
You chose not to be defined.
The battle is internal.
Or defeated by the external.
It's about cultivating a resilient...
That's right.
And growth-oriented attitude.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get tripped up so many times.
And they really talk about the dangers of negative self-talk.
Oh, yeah.
And this fundamental law of human behavior, which is that sooner or later we get what we expect.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like if you keep thinking about...
If you're constantly expecting failure...
How things are going to go wrong.
Ooh,
they probably will.
You're probably going to find it.
Yeah. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
They introduce this concept of contentment.
Right.
But they're very careful to say this is not about...
It's not about suppressing your emotions.
Suppressing emotions or staying stagnant.
Or staying stagnant.
Not that I'm not making much progress, but I'm well-established mentality.
Yeah, I'm fine as long as
I'm positive.
And resilient state of mind.
That's not it.
That helps you withstand failure.
That contentment is a positive and resilient state of mind.
But it's vital.
That's right.
To pair that positive internal state.
And it's important to pair that
with action.
With positive action.
A problem can be solved.
It can be solved.
A fact of life needs to be accepted.
You got to accept it.
Greg Horn didn't just engage in positive thinking.
He didn't. He actually
did something about it.
Took actionable steps.
That's right.
To raise funds, to manage the cleanup, and to reopen. He focused on the things he could control.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I love that they use this analogy of the Norwegian proverb.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as bad weather.
Yeah.
Only bad clothing.
Only bad clothing.
And I think that is such a great...
That's a great analogy.
Analogies for our own lives. Because we can't always control...
You can't control the weather.
The external...
Right, circumstances.
But you can control how you dress.
But we can control how we respond.
That's right.
And how we prepare.
So true.
And then we have a story.
And I think that's so important.
Oh, it's Roger Crawford.
Yeah, Roger Crawford.
Was born
amazing story.
Significant physical differences.
Yeah, he was born with no hands and one foot.
He had no hands and one foot.
Yeah.
And he defied
the odds.
The initial predictions.
Yeah. They said he'd never walk or talk or,
That he would never walk or talk.
All these things. And
he became a varsity tennis player.
Became a tennis player.
Yeah. He's successful. Professional speaker.
Amazing.
And his attitude.
Was
the defining factor in his achievement.
Was amazing.
And he even talks about meeting a stranger with similar physical differences.
But a
completely different outlook.
Challenges, But completely different attitude.
Bitter, resentful, blaming the world for his lack of success.
Finding the world for his problems.
And so it's such a clear picture.
It's a great contrast.
It truly is an inside job.
That's right.
It's about how you approach.
Yeah, it's not about what happens to you, it's what happens in you.
And I think that's such a great transition point to talking about how we can really use failure.
It's about learning to
learn and grow.
Yeah.
And our sources talk about Arnold Palmer.
Arnold Palmer,
he had a legendary golf career.
Yeah, one of the greats.
Even he had significant setbacks.
Oh, yeah, including that infamous 12.
Including a 12 on a single hole.
On a single hole.
Which they now have.
During a tournament.
A plaque?
They actually have a plaque there commemorating it.
Man, what really defined his career
was
his ability to put those bad shots behind him.
Yeah.
He said your next shot can be as good.
Your next shot can be.
Or as bad as your last one.
As good or as bad as your last one.
You'll always get another chance.
But you'll